There is a conversation that takes place at 3 in the morning that most men never remember having, and yet it is the most important conversation of their lives. It happens in the silent borderland between waking and sleep, when the mind has grown quiet enough to hear what it was built to receive. It is not a dream. It is not a fantasy. It is the moment when a man's conscious defenses finally rest, and the deeper layer of his being, that vast, tireless, all-receiving instrument he carries beneath every waking thought, opens like a door that has been waiting all day for the noise to stop. I have sat in that silence. I have heard what it speaks. And what it spoke to me on a particular night in the early years of my research, after Andrew Carnegie had given me the assignment that would consume 20 years of my life and produce a philosophy that would reach tens of millions of souls, was not a whisper from the unknown. It was a law as precise as any law that governs the rotation of the planets or the multiplication of cells within a living body. It was this: the thing you seek has already been given. The only question that remains is whether you will accept it. That single declaration, received in the silence of a 3 o'clock morning, restructured everything I understood about prayer, about desire, about the mind, and about the invisible mechanics of human achievement. Most men pray as though they are writing letters to an address they are not sure exists, hoping against hope that someone on the other end is reading. They pray with doubt wrapped around every word like a wet cloth around a flame. They pray and then they wait, not in expectation but in suspension, hovering between belief and disbelief, accomplishing nothing, receiving nothing, and concluding that either their prayer was not worthy or that the God to whom they prayed was not listening. This is the condition of the ordinary man, and it is a condition produced not by divine indifference, but by an ignorance of law so fundamental, so correctable, so entirely unnecessary, that to witness it in a soul of genuine potential is one of the great sorrows of human observation. For the truth that was revealed to me in that silence, the truth that every great achiever I studied had discovered through their own particular suffering and their own particular breakthrough, is this: faith is not a feeling you wait for. Faith is a condition you manufacture. And the moment you manufacture it completely, you are not hoping for the answer. You are acting as if the answer has already arrived. Because in the invisible world where all things begin, it has. This is the teaching. This is the law. This is what you were guided to this moment to receive. And if you will give it the attention it deserves, not the casual, half-present attention of a man skimming the surface of a river, but the deep, locked, concentrated attention of a man who has decided that what lies beneath that surface is the treasure he came to earth to find, then before these words have ended, something will have shifted in the invisible architecture of your life. Not as metaphor, not as encouragement, as law. Let us begin where every honest examination of human circumstance must begin. Let us begin with the condition of the average man. Look at him honestly, not with cruelty, for he does not deserve cruelty. He deserves the unflinching gift of accurate diagnosis. He rises in the morning without a chief aim. He moves through the hours of his day guided not by a burning central purpose, but by the immediate demands of circumstance, the expectations of others, the habits he formed without deciding to form them. He works, he eats, he rests, he entertains himself, he sleeps, and then he rises again and repeats the same sequence with the same invisible resignation that characterized the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that, stretching backward in a corridor of sameness that he has privately stopped examining because the examination produces a discomfort he has learned to medicate with distraction. He is not a bad man. I want you to hear that clearly. The average man is not a bad man. He is a man operating without the knowledge of the laws that govern human achievement. He is a man who was handed a powerful instrument at birth, an instrument of such extraordinary capacity that even the greatest minds of recorded history have barely scraped the surface of what it can produce, and was never given the manual. He was taught to read. He was taught arithmetic. He was taught the history of wars fought by other men, and the grammar of sentences he would use to communicate the unremarkable facts of an unremarkable daily existence. But he was never taught the one subject that would have transformed every other subject into a tool of unlimited possibility. He was never taught how his own mind works, and because he was never taught this, he drifts. Drift is the natural state of the untrained mind. Just as water finds the path of least resistance, flowing into every low place, spreading itself thin across flat terrain, losing momentum with every turn it does not choose, so too does the undirected mind flow toward whatever external channel is most open, most inviting, most free of friction. Drift is not laziness in the ordinary sense. Some of the most industrious men I have ever observed were also the most perfect examples of drift. They worked enormously hard at tasks that never moved them forward because those tasks had been chosen by circumstance rather than by conscious decision rooted in a definite chief purpose. This is the first diagnosis I must deliver, and I ask you to receive it not as an insult to your intelligence, but as the precise and compassionate identification of the starting point. If you are listening to these words and something in you recognizes the portrait being drawn, if the mirror of this description reflects something you have sensed but refused to name directly, then you are already further along than the man who refuses to look. Awareness is not yet transformation, but it is the door through which transformation must pass. No surgery that has ever healed a man began without the physician first looking directly at what was wrong. And what is wrong, in the overwhelming majority of human lives, is the absence of a single mental condition that every achievement in the history of civilization, when traced back to its origin, will be found to have rested upon. That condition is definiteness. Definiteness of purpose, definiteness of thought, definiteness of faith. The average mind does not operate with definiteness. It operates with generality. It wants things in the vague, shapeless way that a man wants good weather, without any mechanism for producing it, without any understanding of what conditions would need to be arranged, without any specific target that the invisible forces of the universe could organize themselves around. A man who says, "I want to be successful," has said nothing that the subconscious mind can use. A man who says, "I intend to accumulate exactly this sum of money through the application of these specific services by this specific date, and I am willing to give this specific equivalent value in return," that man has given the subconscious a blueprint. And the subconscious, as you will learn before these words have ended, does not evaluate blueprints. It builds them. The universe is not indifferent to the man who drifts. It is simply unable to assist him. Infinite intelligence, that organizing principle which underlies every law of nature and every law of achievement that I have ever identified in the lives of the great, cannot organize itself around a vague wish any more than a master architect can construct a building from a drawing that shows only a cloud. Precision is not a luxury of the achiever. It is the minimum requirement. And so the average man drifts. He prays without precision. He hopes without direction. He works without a central purpose that magnetizes every effort. And at the end of his years, he possesses what any man possesses who operates by default rather than by design. The leftover results of other people's definite purposes played out across a life he never fully claimed as his own. This is where you are if you are being honest. Not all of you, perhaps. Some of you have already awakened to the law and are here tonight to deepen your alignment with it. But for those who are still in the drift, who sense that something greater is available and have not yet found the mechanism for claiming it, I want you to know something before we go further. The distance between where you are and where the law can take you is not measured in years. It is not measured in money or connections or opportunity. It is measured in the clarity and consistency of a single mental decision. One decision, held with constancy, fed with faith, acted upon with persistence, has produced more reversals of human fortune than any external event in recorded history. The law is that powerful, and it is available to you right now. Now let us move from the condition of the average man to the law that explains that condition. Because without understanding this law, truly understanding it, not as an interesting idea, but as an operational reality, nothing that follows will carry its full force. The outer world of every man is the precise reflection of his inner world. This is not poetry. This is not wishful philosophy dressed up in attractive language. This is a law as measurable and as reliable as the law of gravity. Every circumstance in which you currently find yourself, your income, your relationships, your health, your opportunities, your obstacles. Every single external condition bears the exact fingerprint of the dominant thoughts that have been occupying your conscious mind, and, more significantly, infiltrating your subconscious mind over the preceding months and years. The thought is always the first cause. The condition is always the effect. And because most men reverse this understanding, because most men look at their external conditions and believe those conditions are the cause of their inner state, they are forever attempting to solve the effect while ignoring the cause. And they are forever confused by the fact that the effect does not change. Thomas Edison understood this law not through philosophy, but through the disciplined application of an unbreakable expectation. When I had the privilege of spending time with that extraordinary man, what struck me most was not his brilliance, though his brilliance was undeniable, but his absolute refusal to grant permanence to a negative external condition. The thousands of failures in his laboratory were not, to Edison, failures in any final sense. They were data. They were feedback from the material world to the mental world, indicating that a particular approach required adjustment. The idea that the light bulb would work was never in question in Edison's mind. The question was only which of the remaining paths led to the inevitable destination. That is a thought architecture so different from the average man's that it deserves to be recognized for what it is. Not optimism, law. Edison was not optimistic. Edison was certain. And that certainty, held in the face of 10,000 contradictions from the physical world, was itself the force that organized the physical world into the shape of his certainty. Andrew Carnegie demonstrated the same principle at the level of human organization rather than laboratory invention. When Carnegie conceived the idea of the United States Steel Corporation, there were men, educated men, men of experience and financial sophistication, who told him the thing was impossible. The capital required was beyond any single human being's capacity to organize. The logistics were without precedent. The resistance from existing power structures would be insurmountable. Carnegie heard all of this, and then he proceeded as though none of it were true. Not because he was reckless, not because he was ignorant of the obstacles, but because he understood, at the bone-deep level that distinguishes the truly great from the merely competent, that the obstacles existed in the external world, and the plan existed in the mental world, and that the mental world is always the senior of the two. The mental world creates, the physical world receives. Henry Ford carried this understanding further than perhaps any man of his era. When Ford announced his intention to build a V8 engine cast in a single block, his engineers told him plainly that it could not be done. The metallurgy was impossible. The tolerances were unreachable. The design contradicted everything the assembled expertise of the automobile industry had concluded about what was achievable. Ford's response to this assembled expertise has since entered the permanent record of what determined thought looks like in action. He told them to keep working. He repeated this instruction for a year. The engineers kept working and kept reporting that it could not be done. Ford kept giving the same instruction. And somewhere in that second year, the engine that could not be done revealed itself as entirely possible. The physical world rearranged itself to match the mental world of the man who refused to accept the physical world's initial verdict. These are not exceptional stories of exceptional men. These are demonstrations of a law that is available to every man and woman who will apply it with the consistency these men applied it. The law does not know the name Henry Ford. The law does not prefer the famous or the wealthy. The law responds to the quality of thought directed at it. And a man in a small room with a clear and burning desire, held with the faith that transforms desire into expected reality, has precisely the same access to the law's unlimited power as any titan of industry who ever lived. This brings us to the third layer of understanding, and it is here that the difference between a life of achievement and a life of drift is made permanently clear. The difference is not talent, not timing, not circumstance, not luck, that word which the average man uses to explain what he does not yet understand. The difference is definiteness of purpose. Edwin C. Barnes arrived at Thomas Edison's laboratory in New Jersey with nothing. He had no money, no connections, no prior relationship with the great inventor. He had no qualifications that the world would have recognized as worthy of consideration. What he had was a burning desire so specific, so relentless, so fixed upon its target, that it had organized his entire mental and physical being into a single instrument pointed at a single destination. He intended to become a business partner of Thomas Edison. Not an employee, not an admirer, a partner. The specificity of that desire is the thing I want you to absorb. Not a vague wish to work in technology, not a general hope to be successful in business. A single, named, precisely defined chief aim from which he refused to be dislodged by any evidence of impossibility that the external world placed before him. Edison did not offer him a partnership on his arrival. Edison gave him a minor position, a foot in the door, a chance to observe and to demonstrate. Barnes accepted this without abandoning his aim. He held the vision. He acted in the direction of the vision every single day, regardless of what the immediate evidence suggested about whether the vision was achievable. And in time, in the inevitable time that always follows the consistent application of definiteness to a worthy purpose, the opportunity arrived. Edison had invented a machine that his own salesmen refused to promote because they believed it would not sell. Barnes saw the machine. Barnes recognized the opportunity. Barnes promoted the machine with the full force of a man whose burning desire had been in training for years. And he sold it with such extraordinary results that Edison named him his partner. The partnership of Edwin C. Barnes and Thomas Edison was not luck. It was law. The law of definiteness, applied consistently over time, always produces the result that the vague wisher never reaches and the average man calls impossible. The burning desire, held with precision, communicated to the subconscious mind through daily repetition until it became the dominant mental climate, did what burning desire directed by definiteness always does. It attracted the circumstance. It organized the opportunity. It found the path through the obstacles that the man without a definite purpose never finds because he is not looking in any consistent direction long enough for the path to reveal itself. What does it mean specifically to hold a definite chief aim? It means choosing one burning desire, not 3, not 5, but one, that you are willing to give everything to obtain. It means writing it down in precise terms, the amount, the date, the service you intend to provide in exchange, the plan you intend to follow. And then it means reading those words aloud, with full emotional engagement, morning and night without exception, until the words are no longer words but living beliefs that your subconscious has accepted as the description of an inevitable reality. This reading, this daily declaration to your own subconscious mind, is not a ritual of hope. It is a surgical procedure. You are not asking the subconscious to consider your desire, you are installing it. You are using the mechanism of repetition combined with the emotion of faith to bypass the conscious mind's skepticism and speak directly to the layer of mind that does not argue with instructions. It receives them. It builds according to them. It rearranges the invisible architecture of your life to match the blueprint you have handed it. This is what Carnegie did every day of his productive life. This is what Edison was doing every hour he spent in the laboratory, even when every external result contradicted his expectation. This is what Ford was doing when he told his engineers to keep working for a year after they told him the engine was impossible. They were not being stubborn in the ordinary sense. They were holding the completed blueprint in their minds against the incomplete evidence of the material world, because they understood that the material world always follows the mental world and never the other way around. Now we reach the teaching that separates those who understand the principles intellectually from those who live by them as operational reality. And that teaching is the nature of faith. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them. Speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you, I have already received the answer to my deepest desire. I do not wait for it. I acknowledge it. I move toward it with the certainty of a man who holds a map to a destination he has already chosen. I am not hoping for my good. I am claiming my good. My mind is the most powerful instrument on this earth, and I direct it with precision toward a single burning target. I do not argue with the law, I apply the law. I do not fear the obstacle. I know that the obstacle is the path revealing its next step. I do not require the approval of other minds for the certainty that lives in my own. Faith is not a feeling that visits me. Faith is a condition I manufacture daily through the repetition of truth spoken with conviction. I manufacture it now. I maintain it now. I act from it now, in this moment and in every moment that follows. My desire is already answered in the invisible world. I now move with absolute consistency toward its physical equivalent. The law works through me. The law works as me, and the law cannot fail. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Faith, as it is taught in most circles, is treated as though it were an inheritance, as though some men are born with it and others are not, as though it arrives in moments of grace and departs in moments of trial, leaving the man at the mercy of whatever emotional weather happens to be moving through his life on a given day. This understanding of faith is, I say to you, with the authority of 20 years of research into the lives of the greatest achievers in American history, a complete and costly misunderstanding. Faith is manufactured. It is produced through a deliberate, daily, emotionally engaged process of declaring to your own subconscious mind the truth of your desire as an already established fact. It is produced through autosuggestion. Autosuggestion is the language through which the conscious mind communicates with the subconscious. Every thought you hold with emotion, every sentence you speak with conviction, every image you revisit with intensity, all of these are transmissions from your conscious awareness to the deeper layer of mind that does not evaluate what it receives. The subconscious mind is not a judge, it is a builder. Hand it fear, and it builds the architecture of fear into your circumstances, your health, your relationships, your opportunities. Hand it faith in a specific and desired outcome, and it builds the architecture of that outcome into your life with the same mechanical reliability. This is why the instruction to act as if God has already answered your prayer is not merely a spiritual comfort. It is a precise operational directive aimed at a precise mechanism of the mind. When you act as if, when you carry yourself with the posture of a man whose prayer has been answered, when you make decisions from the position of a man who already possesses what he desires, when you speak of your desire as an inevitability rather than a hope, you are feeding your subconscious the exact emotional and declarative content it requires to begin building in the direction of that inevitability. You are not pretending, you are programming. And the difference between those two activities is the difference between a life of magnificent achievement and a life of perpetual aspiration that never arrives. The subconscious mind receives every impression with complete neutrality. This is the most important sentence in this teaching, and I ask you to hold it long enough for its full implication to reach you. The subconscious mind receives every impression with complete neutrality. It does not prefer courage over fear. It does not prefer abundance over poverty. It does not evaluate the worthiness of what it is given and reject the negative while accepting the positive. It accepts everything with equal thoroughness and builds with equal diligence according to whatever it has been most consistently and most emotionally given. This is why two men of identical natural talent and identical external opportunity can produce entirely different results. It is not that one was favored by circumstance and the other was not. It is that one fed his subconscious a consistent diet of faith-based, desire-specific, emotionally charged expectations, and the other fed his subconscious a consistent diet of doubt, worry, fear, and limitation. The subconscious built exactly what it was given in both cases. It could not do otherwise. It is a builder without opinion, without preference, without hesitation. Give it a blueprint, and it builds. The quality of your life is the quality of the blueprint you have been handing to this instrument, consciously or unconsciously, day after day and night after night. And the nights are more significant than most men understand. While the conscious mind rests, the subconscious continues its work without interruption. The last dominant thought you carry into sleep becomes the instruction that the subconscious works from through the hours of darkness. This is not a theory. This is a law of such practical importance that the man who understands it and applies it commands 8 hours of every day that the man who sleeps without intention simply wastes. Your sleep is not a pause in your progress. Your sleep is a workshop. The question is only whether you are handing the workshop a blueprint or allowing the random debris of the day's worries to pile up on the workbench. We are now standing at the point where it becomes necessary to confront the enemy directly. Because there is an enemy. It is not external. It is not a competitor in your industry. It is not a lack of capital, or a lack of connection, or a lack of opportunity. The enemy lives inside the mind that should be your ally, and it wears so many convincing disguises that most men spend their entire lives serving it without ever recognizing that it is the source of every prison they have ever inhabited. The enemy is fear, and it does not come as fear. That is the first and most critical thing I must tell you about it. Fear does not announce itself. It does not knock on the door of your mind wearing a sign that says, "I am here to destroy your potential." It comes dressed as wisdom. It comes dressed as caution. It comes dressed as practical thinking, as experience, as the hard-learned knowledge of a man who has been disappointed before and is simply being careful this time. It comes dressed as the advice of people who love you. It comes dressed as the consensus of your social environment. And in every disguise it wears, it whispers the same message. Do not try. Do not reach. Do not risk. Stay where you are, where it is known, where it is small, where it is safe. And the man who obeys this whisper calls himself prudent, and the law of growth passes him by entirely. I identified 6 specific manifestations of fear that operate most destructively in the lives of ordinary men and women. I named them the 6 ghosts of fear, and I want to destroy each of them here one at a time in your presence, using the precise law that each ghost cannot survive contact with. The first ghost is the fear of poverty. It is the most common and the most crippling of all the fears that afflict the human mind. It operates by directing thought toward the condition of lack, toward the possibility of loss, toward the nightmare of insufficiency. And in doing so, it creates precisely the conditions it claims to be warning against. The man who fears poverty thinks about poverty constantly. He talks about it. He makes his decisions based on it. He pulls back from every opportunity that carries any element of risk, because the fear of losing what little he has is stronger in his mind than the faith in gaining what he desires. And the subconscious mind, receiving this constant diet of poverty-directed thought with its characteristic impartiality, builds the architecture of poverty into his circumstances with the same thoroughness that it would build the architecture of abundance if it had been given abundance-directed thought instead. The fear of poverty was not born in you. It was installed in you by an environment of scarcity thinking that surrounded you before you had the knowledge to evaluate what you were receiving. The families that pass financial limitation from generation to generation do not do so primarily through a lack of money. They do so through a transmission of thought patterns about money. The child who hears consistently that money is hard to obtain, that wealthy people are different from ordinary people, that wanting more than you have is greediness, that security is more valuable than growth, that child absorbs these thoughts into a subconscious mind that will build his financial life accordingly for decades, unless he consciously intervenes with a different instruction. The law that destroys the fear of poverty is the law of definiteness directed toward a specific desired financial outcome. You cannot hold fear of poverty and a specific burning desire for abundance in your mind simultaneously. One will drive out the other. The question is only which one you feed with greater emotional intensity and greater daily repetition. The man who writes down his exact financial desire, who reads it aloud morning and night with the full conviction of faith already manufactured, who acts daily in the direction of that desire, feeds his subconscious the counter-instruction that gradually dismantles the fear's architecture and replaces it with the architecture of his chosen outcome. I declare this day, poverty is a thought condition before it is a material condition, and I have chosen my thoughts. The second ghost is the fear of criticism. It operates in more lives than perhaps any other fear, and it operates in the most subtle ways. The man who fears criticism does not know himself primarily as afraid. He knows himself as careful. He knows himself as considerate. He knows himself as someone who thinks before he speaks and measures before he moves. But remove the disguise, and what you find underneath is a man who has made the opinions of other people the primary authority in his own life, surrendering his judgment, his direction, and ultimately his destiny to a committee he never elected and that has no investment in his actual flourishing. The fear of criticism was installed in most of us in childhood, when the disapproval of parents and teachers was a genuine material threat to survival and comfort. In childhood, criticism from authority figures carries consequences. The lesson the child learns is that what others think of you determines what happens to you. And this lesson, carried into adulthood and applied to ambition, creativity, and the pursuit of any purpose large enough to attract attention, becomes a prison of enormous strength built entirely from something that does not exist, the imagined judgments of other minds. Edison was criticized relentlessly throughout his career. The established scientific community of his day did not celebrate his methods. They doubted them. They challenged them publicly. If Edison had made the opinions of his critics the measure of his next step, the light bulb would not exist. Carnegie was criticized for his methods, for his wealth, for his decisions about labor. Lincoln was criticized in terms so vicious that a modern observer would find them shocking. Every man who has achieved anything significant has attracted criticism in proportion to the significance of his achievement, because significance draws attention, and attention includes resistance. The law that destroys the fear of criticism is the law of definiteness applied to self-governance. A man with a definite chief aim does not require the approval of other minds to proceed in the direction of that aim. His certainty comes not from consensus, but from the clarity of his purpose and the strength of his faith in the law that governs achievement. He considers counsel from wise and experienced sources. He is not arrogant, but he does not mistake the opinion of the uninformed crowd for the verdict of the law. The law speaks through results over time, not through the commentary of those who have not yet dared to aim. I declare this day, the only authority I grant power over my direction is the law itself, which I study, obey, and trust above all other voices. The third ghost is the fear of ill health. It operates by directing the power of the imagination, that remarkable faculty which is the greatest creative gift the human mind possesses, toward the production of physical symptoms. The man who thinks constantly about disease invites the subconscious mind to manufacture the physical conditions that match the thought. The hypochondriac is not simply dramatic. He is demonstrating in an extreme form a principle that operates in milder forms in millions of lives. The thought of ill health, held consistently and emotionally, communicates to the subconscious a building instruction that the subconscious executes with the same fidelity it brings to every other instruction it receives. The law that destroys the fear of ill health is the law of transmutation applied to the physical body. Direct the same creative imagination that has been painting pictures of disease toward painting pictures of vitality, of strength, of a body operating at its maximum capacity in the service of a definite purpose. This is not denial of physical reality. It is the understanding that physical reality is downstream of mental reality, and that the man who would change the physical must begin by changing the mental climate that produces it. I declare this day, my body is the instrument of my purpose, and I feed that instrument with the thought of wholeness, strength, and vitality. The fourth ghost is the fear of loss of love. It manifests as jealousy, possessiveness, suspicion, all the contractions of the spirit that occur when a man has placed his sense of adequacy and security in the keeping of another person's continued affection rather than in the laws that govern his own inner world. The man who fears the loss of love has made love a thing he receives rather than a thing he generates, and in doing so has made himself permanently vulnerable to a condition entirely outside his control. The law that destroys the fear of loss of love is the recognition that love, like all forms of abundance, is generated from the inside. A man who operates from a place of inner sufficiency, whose identity does not depend on the validation of others for its completeness, does not fear the withdrawal of love because he is not dependent on it for his sense of who he is. He values love. He cultivates it. He gives it generously. But he does not require it as oxygen, and therefore it does not hold him hostage. I declare this day, I am the source of the love that operates through my life, and that source is inexhaustible. The fifth ghost is the fear of old age. It is the fear that time is an enemy, that the years ahead contain less possibility than the years behind, that the body's changing is a sentence rather than simply a season. The man who lives under the fear of old age spends his middle years mourning what he imagines he has already lost, rather than building with the enormous resources of experience, knowledge, and perspective that those years have given him that his younger self did not possess. The law that destroys the fear of old age is the recognition that the most productive years in the lives of most great achievers came well into what the ordinary man would call the later portion of life. Carnegie built his greatest structures in his 50s. The mental maturity required to hold a definite purpose against all opposition, to organize the mastermind principle with sufficient wisdom to select the right allies, to remain persistent through the cycles of apparent failure that precede every great achievement. These are capacities that ripen with years, not capacities that diminish. I declare this day, every year that passes is an addition to my power, not a subtraction from my possibility. The sixth ghost is the fear of death. It is the oldest and the deepest of all human fears, and in some measure it underlies all the others, for every fear is ultimately a fear of annihilation in some form. The fear of poverty is the fear of the death of security. The fear of criticism is the fear of the death of identity. And the fear of literal death creates in many men a permanent undercurrent of urgency and despair that sabotages every effort at construction before it can be completed. The law that destroys the fear of death is the recognition that the energy which animates life is indestructible. I do not offer you a religious claim, though religion's deepest teachers have said the same thing in many languages across many centuries. I offer you the scientific observation that no energy is ever destroyed. It is only transmuted. What you are at the deepest level of your being is not the body that will one day cease to function. What you are is the intelligent force that operates through that body, that has access to infinite intelligence, that transmits and receives through the great medium that connects every mind to every other mind, and to the organizing principle of all creation. That force does not die. I declare this day, I am not afraid. I am the living expression of an indestructible intelligence directed toward a definite purpose, and I move forward without fear. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them, speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you. Every fear that has ever slowed me loses its power over me now. I name it and I dissolve it. Poverty is a thought condition, and I have changed my thoughts. Criticism is the noise of spectators watching a race they chose not to run, and their noise means nothing to the runner. Ill health is a thought pattern, and I choose a different pattern. Loss of love cannot threaten a man who is the source of love rather than merely its recipient. Old age is a season of increasing power for the man who has been building all his life, and death is only the fear of a misunderstanding about what I actually am. I am free, I am clear, I move forward. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Now we advance to a principle that separates the merely self-disciplined achiever from the truly great ones. No man who has ever built anything of lasting significance has built it alone. This is not a limitation on individual power. It is a demonstration of a law that multiplies individual power beyond any single mind's natural capacity. It is the mastermind principle. When two or more minds come together in a spirit of perfect harmony and apply their combined intelligence to a definite purpose, the result is not the sum of those minds. It is something qualitatively different, something that operates on a frequency of intelligence and creative power not available to any single mind operating in isolation. Carnegie told me personally that his entire fortune was attributable not to his individual mental power, but to the mastermind alliance he formed and maintained with the specific men he gathered around him for the specific purpose of building his empire. He was emphatic that no single mind in his alliance, including his own, possessed the knowledge and capacity required to produce what the alliance produced together. The alliance created a third mind, a group mind, that had access to a range and depth of intelligence that none of its individual components could have reached alone. Andrew Carnegie understood this law at the deepest level and organized his entire business life around it. Charles M. Schwab was one of the great expressions of this principle in action. Schwab's ability to inspire men, to communicate vision, to harmonize the efforts of diverse individuals toward a single coordinated purpose, made him the human instrument through which Carnegie's mastermind operated at its most effective level. When Schwab stood before J.P. Morgan and spoke for 90 minutes with such conviction and clarity about the vision of United States Steel that Morgan agreed on the spot to finance the largest business transaction in American history to that point, he was demonstrating not merely the power of one exceptional mind. He was demonstrating the accumulated power of a mastermind alliance that had been building its momentum and its clarity of purpose for years. Who are the members of your mastermind alliance? This is not a theoretical question. This is the most practical business question you can ask yourself today. Every great purpose requires more than one mind to achieve it. Not because your individual mind is inadequate. Your individual mind, operating at its full capacity and directed by a definite chief aim with faith-sustained consistency, is a force of extraordinary power. But because the law of multiplication operates in the mental world as surely as it operates in the mathematical world, and the man who applies it in forming the right alliances of purpose-aligned, harmony-directed, faith-operating minds will achieve in years what would otherwise require a lifetime or longer. Choose your mastermind members with the precision you would apply to any other critical element of your plan. Choose them for what they contribute to the common purpose, not for what the association costs you nothing to maintain. Choose them for their alignment with the principle, for their willingness to operate from faith rather than fear, for their commitment to the definite chief aim that the alliance exists to achieve. And once chosen, meet with them regularly, in physical or mental presence, and bring to every meeting the full intensity of your purpose-directed mind, so that the third intelligence, the mastermind intelligence that only activates in the field of harmony and shared direction, can do its work. Lincoln assembled a cabinet of men who were his rivals, men who disagreed with him, men who had publicly opposed him. This has been called political wisdom, and it was. But it was also a mastermind operation of extraordinary sophistication. Lincoln understood that the purpose, preserving the Union and ending slavery, required the broadest possible range of political and intellectual capacity applied to it, regardless of the personal tensions between its members. He was the harmonic center of an alliance that produced what no single political mind of that era could have produced alone. The Emancipation Proclamation, the preservation of the United States, these were mastermind achievements. Lincoln was their architect. Now I want to speak to you about something that operates in your life every moment of every day, shaping your character and your destiny with a consistency and a power that most men attribute to fate, to God, to chance, to anything, in other words, except the actual mechanism that is at work. It is the law of cosmic habit force, and it is perhaps the most relentlessly operating of all the laws I have studied and identified. Every thought you think with sufficient repetition and emotion becomes a habit of thought. Every habit of thought becomes in time an automatic response of the mind to the conditions it encounters. A sufficient accumulation of automatic mental responses constitutes what we call character. And character, as I have observed in the lives of hundreds of the most successful and most unsuccessful men and women in American history, is destiny. Not in a deterministic sense that removes free will, but in the sense that the man who does not consciously choose his habits of thought by daily, deliberate, emotion-charged declaration will have his habits of thought chosen for him by his environment, and will produce the results that environment's habits of thought have always produced. The law of cosmic habit force does not take sides. It does not favor the noble over the ignoble, the aspiring over the content, the faithful over the fearful. It takes whatever has been most consistently practiced and makes it automatic. It takes whatever has been most emotionally reinforced and makes it the default position from which the mind operates. This is equally true for the habits that lift a man and the habits that bind him. The man who has spent 10 years practicing doubt has an automatic doubt response to any new proposition. The man who has spent 10 years practicing faith has an automatic faith response. The law produced both outcomes with equal thoroughness. The difference was the choice of what to practice. This is why the sleep hours are of such extraordinary strategic importance. For 8 hours every night, while the conscious mind rests and its filtering, evaluating, doubting function is suspended, the subconscious is imprinting whatever it has been given. The last thought of the night is the opening instruction of the night's work. The repeated thought over many nights is the habit being formed in the deepest layer of the mind, and the habit formed in the deepest layer of the mind is the pattern from which the daily life will be constructed. The man who takes a specific, clearly defined, emotionally charged desire into sleep every night is using 8 hours of every 24 to build the mental habit that will produce his desired result. The man who takes worry, resentment, doubt, or the unresolved tensions of a day lived without purpose into sleep every night is using those same 8 hours to deepen the architecture of the conditions he most wants to escape. This is not poetic language. This is the operational description of how the law of cosmic habit force works during the hours when most men assume nothing of importance is happening. The sleep hours are the hours of greatest subconscious influence. The mind, freed from the conscious noise of daily decision and social interaction and sensory input, is at its most receptive to the deeper impressions that will form the bedrock of habit. This is why the nightly repetition of your definite chief aim, spoken aloud with full emotional engagement immediately before sleep, is not merely a motivational practice. It is a precision tool for the deliberate construction of the mental habit from which your desired life will be built. Use it accordingly. Use it without fail. Use it every night, not on the nights when you feel inspired and the faith comes easily, but every night, especially the nights when the evidence of the day has been discouraging and the law seems remote and the temptation to surrender is strongest. Those nights, above all others, are the nights when the counter-instruction is most needed and most effective. Let us consider now the law that explains why some men are compensated beyond all apparent proportion to their efforts, while others work with equal diligence and remain forever confined to the wages of mere adequacy. It is not a mystery. It is a law. It is the law of compensation as expressed through the principle of going the extra mile. The man who gives precisely what he is paid for and not 1 ounce more has established an exact equation between his output and his compensation, and the law has no mechanism for expanding that equation. He is doing what is required. He is meeting the minimum standard, and the minimum standard by definition has no excess to offer the law of compensation anything to work with. The man who gives more than he is paid for, who invests additional effort, additional creativity, additional care, additional precision, additional service beyond what his immediate compensation requires, creates a surplus. And the law of compensation, which operates with the same mechanical reliability as every other law I have identified, cannot allow that surplus to remain unmatched. The universe is not capable of debt. What goes out more than its equivalent must eventually return more than its equivalent. This is not generosity rewarded by a benevolent universe. It is arithmetic applied to the invisible world. John D. Rockefeller built the most extraordinary private fortune in American history, not by being the luckiest man in America or the most talented man in America, though he was formidably talented. He built it by applying an organizational intelligence to the oil industry that created more efficiency, more reliability, more value for more people than any competitor was producing. He went the extra mile in his thinking, in his organization, in the precision of his planning, until the surplus he had created in value for the marketplace became impossible for the law of compensation to ignore. Standard Oil did not grow because Rockefeller was fortunate. It grew because Rockefeller gave more than the marketplace required until the law of compensation had no choice but to give more than he had originally expected. Every man reading these words tonight who has a position of employment, a business, a creative practice, a service they provide to the world, Every one of those men has the same access to this law that Rockefeller had. The application differs in scale. The law does not differ at all. Ask yourself honestly, am I giving everything this position, this business, this service requires, and then more? Am I the man in any room who has given the most thorough preparation, the most careful attention to quality, the most genuine concern for the good of those being served? If the answer is not yes, then the surplus that triggers the law of compensation has not yet been created. Create it, not because someone is watching, not because an immediate reward is visible, because the law is watching, and the law rewards surplus with a reliability that no human judge could match. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them, speak them, feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion, so declare with everything in you. I am the kind of man who gives more than is asked and expects more than is ordinary, because the law of compensation is the most reliable employer I have ever worked for, and I understand its requirements. I bring to every task the full force of my attention, my creativity, my genuine desire to produce excellence, and I hold nothing in reserve for a safer moment that is never coming. I plant now. I plant abundantly, and I plant with the absolute certainty of harvest that comes from understanding the law that governs planting. I do not give to be seen giving. I give because the law of my own growth requires that I empty the vessel so that it can be filled again to a greater capacity than before. Every act of service given beyond what is required is a deposit in the account that the law manages, and from which it pays with perfect accuracy and perfect timing. I am building that account daily. I am building it now. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. Before I speak of controlled attention, I want to deepen the understanding of what it means to go the extra mile, because most men who hear this principle hear it as a workplace productivity instruction and miss entirely the metaphysical law operating beneath its surface. Going the extra mile is not, at its core, a strategy for impressing an employer. It is a method of aligning yourself with the law of increase, which is the principle by which the universe operates in its most generous mode. Study the life of any man who built a great fortune, and you will find, if you examine it honestly and trace the sequence of events with rigor, that the turning point, the moment when fortune shifted from the gradual to the exponential, came when that man began giving more than was required without calculation, without measurement, without the keeping of any mental ledger of what was owed to him in return. The man who gives exactly what is required and no more has made himself a mechanism for maintaining the status quo. His output and his income are locked in a perpetual equation that the law cannot disturb because he is not providing the law with any surplus to multiply. The man who gives surplus, who brings to his work a quality of attention and a depth of genuine service that exceeds the immediate requirement, has introduced into the law of compensation a variable that the law is obligated to address. Nature abhors an unbalanced equation. The law of compensation is nature's accounting department, and it does not allow surpluses to remain unmatched. I want to illustrate this with a truth so precise it borders on the arithmetical. Consider the man employed at a fixed wage for a fixed function. He arrives on time. He performs the function. He departs at the end of the designated period. His wage is paid. The equation is exactly balanced. Now consider what happens the moment he begins to bring to that function an additional quality, additional preparation, additional care, additional thought about how the function could be performed better, additional attention to the needs of those being served. He has introduced into the equation a positive surplus. He has given the law something to respond to, and the law, with its mechanical impartiality, begins the process of returning the equivalent of that surplus, not always in the form of an immediate wage increase from the current employer, and not always along a path the man could have predicted or planned. The law is not obligated to route its response through the channel through which the surplus was given. It is only obligated to ensure that the response comes. and it always does. Charles Schwab was the most dramatic example of this principle I ever personally witnessed. Schwab began his career as a stake driver in a construction site owned by Andrew Carnegie. He was paid the wage appropriate to that function, but the quality of mind and the quality of effort he brought to that function were entirely disproportionate to its requirements. He studied the larger operation. He looked beyond his immediate task at the entire structure of what was being built and how it could be built better. He brought to every responsibility assigned to him not the effort of a man doing his job, but the effort of a man acting as though the entire enterprise were his responsibility and its excellence were his personal obligation. Carnegie noticed this not because Carnegie was sentimental about effort, but because Carnegie understood the law and recognized in Schwab a man who was unconsciously applying it at a level that made his current compensation a temporary error that the law would shortly correct. That recognition produced one of the most extraordinary career trajectories in the history of American business. The stake driver became, in the fullness of the law's timing, the president of Carnegie Steel, and then the first president of United States Steel, the largest corporation in American history at the time of its formation. The man who gave surplus was given abundance by a law that cannot distinguish between a stake driver and a president when both are demonstrating identical mental qualities. Do not wait for the right position to give your best. The man who is waiting to give his best until he has the right title, the right platform, the right audience, the right compensation, has misunderstood how the law works. The right position is created by giving your best in the position you currently occupy. The law does not promote men who are saving their best for later. It promotes men who are demonstrating their best now. Every day you go beyond what is required is a day the law records in your favor, and the law's accounts are perfect. Now I will speak to you of controlled attention, which is the master discipline of all truly great minds, and the one faculty whose development separates the man of ordinary achievement from the man of extraordinary achievement, with a clarity that no other distinction can match. Every achievement that has ever been produced in the history of human civilization was the result, at its origin, of a mind that held its attention on a specific target with a consistency and an intensity that refused to be broken by distraction, by discouragement, by the passage of time, or by the negative commentary of the surrounding environment. Edison's controlled attention on the problem of incandescent light was so absolute that it consumed years and produced thousands of experiments that produced no commercial light bulb and yet never broke the central focus. Ford's controlled attention on the mass production of the automobile was so fixed that it survived the ridicule of every established automotive expert of his era. Lincoln's controlled attention on the preservation of the Union endured 4 years of the most terrible war in American experience, the deaths of hundreds of thousands of men, the constant political opposition of members of his own cabinet and his own party, and the private grief of a man whose family was torn apart by the same conflict his public life was devoted to resolving. What is controlled attention? It is the daily, deliberate direction of all the mind's power toward the service of the definite chief aim. It is the practice of returning the mind again and again, whenever it drifts toward the irrelevant or the fearful, to the single burning target that has been chosen as the master purpose of the current season of life. It is the refusal to allow the mind to be colonized by the concerns, the opinions, the priorities, and the fears of other people's agendas. And it is, in the age of infinite distraction that currently surrounds every human being with an unending stream of competing claims on the attention, the single most countercultural and the single most powerful thing you can do for the advancement of your definite purpose. The destruction of distraction begins with the clarity of your purpose. A man who knows exactly where he is going is much more difficult to redirect than a man who is merely moving without a destination. Every piece of information that arrives in the field of a purposeless mind finds an open landing strip because there is no existing organization of priorities to evaluate its relevance. Every piece of information that arrives in the field of a purpose-directed mind is immediately evaluated against the question, does this serve my chief aim or does it not? And the answer to that question becomes the gate through which the mind either admits the information or dismisses it. Practice controlled attention as a daily discipline. Choose the hour of each day that your mental energy is at its peak. For most men, this is in the early morning, before the demands of the day have eroded the freshness of the mind's focus. And dedicate that hour without negotiation and without exception to the work that most directly advances your definite chief aim. 1 hour of fully controlled, fully present, purpose-directed thought and action produces more movement toward your desired destination than 8 hours of distracted, interrupted, divided attention labor. The quality of attention multiplies the value of the time it occupies by a factor that no mere increase in hours worked can match. Rockefeller practiced controlled attention at the level of the organizational mind. He brought the same systematic, undivided, precision-directed focus to the structure of his business that Edison brought to the laboratory experiment and Ford brought to the factory floor. The law of controlled attention does not discriminate between these domains of application. It operates wherever a mind brings its full and undivided power to bear on a specific purpose. The domain is irrelevant. The focus is the activating principle. I want to speak now of what happens inside the mind of a man who has practiced controlled attention long enough for it to become his natural mode of operation, because this is where the principle reveals its deepest reward. The man of controlled attention develops a relationship with his own mind that the scattered man never experiences. He begins to observe that his mind, directed consistently toward a specific purpose, begins to return to him ideas he did not consciously generate. Solutions arrive. Connections appear between things that seemed unrelated. People come into his life whose capacities align perfectly with the next requirement of his purpose. What the undisciplined observer calls coincidence, the man who understands the law recognizes as the organized response of infinite intelligence to a clear and consistently held mental invitation. The controlled attention is the invitation. The opportunities and ideas are the response. Edison described this experience with characteristic precision. He said that his best inventions did not come from the laboratory experiments themselves, but from a state of deep, concentrated contemplation that he would sometimes enter for hours at a time, in which he was not consciously thinking about the problem, but was simply in a state of receptive, focused awareness pointed in the direction of the problem. He was, in the language of this teaching, holding controlled attention without forcing it, and in that quality of awareness, infinite intelligence would present its answer. He was not generating the answer. He was creating the condition in which the answer could be received. This is the advanced practice of controlled attention, and it is available to every man who has first established the foundational discipline of daily purposeful focus. Every great inventor has described some version of this experience. Every great artist, every great statesman. The moment when the solution arrives not from the grinding effort of the working mind, but from the quiet depth of a mind that has been disciplined enough to get out of its own way. But the quiet depth is not available to the undisciplined mind. The undisciplined mind is never truly quiet. It is always occupied with whatever noise the environment has most recently deposited in it. The disciplined mind, the mind that has practiced controlled attention with the consistency that makes it a habit through the operation of cosmic habit force, has created within itself a silence that is not empty, but is, on the contrary, filled with a quality of receptive intelligence that the busy mind cannot access. This is the advanced promise of controlled attention. Not merely the ability to focus on your chosen purpose, but the ability to receive, from the infinite intelligence that underlies all creation, the specific guidance and inspiration that your purpose requires. The mechanism is not mystical, it is law. A signal requires a receiver tuned to its frequency. Controlled attention tunes the mind to the frequency of the answer it is seeking. An infinite intelligence, which has already generated the answer to every human problem that a truly purposeful mind has ever focused upon, cannot fail to transmit when the receiver is properly tuned. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them. Speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you, "My attention is the most valuable possession I own, and I direct it with absolute precision toward my definite chief aim. I am not available to be scattered. I am not colonized by distraction. I bring to the most important work of my day the full, undivided, emotion-charged focus of a mind that knows exactly what it is building and exactly why the building matters. I am becoming the person whose focus is so singular, so consistent, so unhurried and yet so unstoppable that the universe responds to my mind as to a tuning fork, matching my frequency, delivering my answer, providing my opportunity at the exact moment my controlled attention has created the condition for its arrival. I am tuned to the answer. The answer is on its way. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. We are now approaching the final transformation. We are approaching the moment where all the invisible work of the preceding layers, the definiteness, the faith, the subconscious programming, the destruction of fear, the mastermind alliances, the habits built through cosmic habit force, the surplus created through going the extra mile, the focus maintained through controlled attention. All of this invisible work reaches the tipping point where it can no longer remain invisible, where it must, by the inflexible operation of the law, become visible. This is the law of transmutation of desire. Desire, when it is definite, when it is emotionally intense, when it is sustained over time without surrender, when it is organized into a plan and pursued with persistent action, transmutes. It changes form. It moves from the invisible world where all things originate to the visible world where all things that originated in the invisible are eventually expressed. It becomes money. It becomes influence. It becomes health. It becomes the relationship, the creation, the discovery, the business, the life that the desire was aimed at from the beginning. This transmutation is not instantaneous in most cases, though there are documented instances of extraordinary rapidity. It is a process, and the process has a timeline that the law determines, not the man. The man's only obligation is to continue providing the conditions, the faith, the action, the persistence, the correct mental climate, until the transmutation completes itself. Let me speak plainly about the nature of this transmutation so that you understand what you are cooperating with when you apply the principles of this teaching. Desire in its raw form is energy. It is the same energy that moves through every living thing and every creative act in the observable universe. A burning desire for a specific outcome is not a psychological state distinct from physical reality. It is energy organized by specificity and intensified by emotion, pointed in a direction. The law of transmutation states that energy directed with sufficient specificity and sufficient intensity toward a specific material equivalent must, by the same principle by which electrical energy directed through the right medium produces light, produce the material equivalent of the desire. This is not metaphor. This is physics applied to the mental world, which is the world that governs the physical one. When I sat with Andrew Carnegie during the initial interview from which this entire philosophy was born, I asked him how he had transformed his early desire for wealth into the reality of his fortune. His answer was precise enough to fill volumes, but its essence was this: he never allowed any distinction in his mind between the desire and the thing desired. From the earliest moment he had committed to his definite aim, he treated it in his mental life as already accomplished. He did not think of his desired fortune as a future event. He thought of it as a present reality that had not yet fully expressed itself in the physical world, but was no less real for that delay. He was not acting. He was not pretending. He was applying, with the full seriousness of a scientist applying a law he has verified, the principle that the thought of the thing and the thing itself are the same thing at different stages of the same process. And the process, once properly initiated and consistently maintained, cannot be stopped. It can only be delayed by the man himself through the introduction of doubt or the abandonment of his conditions. This is the most liberating truth in the entire philosophy of achievement. The process cannot be stopped from outside. No competitor can stop it. No economic condition can stop it. No social obstacle can stop it. No amount of prior failure can stop it. The only force in the universe that can prevent the transmutation of a properly held burning desire into its physical equivalent is the mind of the man who holds the desire, choosing to abandon the conditions. Everything outside is irrelevant. The law does not consult the external world when deciding whether to operate. It consults only the mental world of the man, and in the mental world, the man is the only authority. This means that at every moment, in every circumstance, regardless of what the external world is currently showing you, you are the sole determining factor in whether the law operates in your favor or is temporarily suspended by your own doubt. This is not a burden. It is the most extraordinary freedom ever offered to a human being. You are the only obstacle. You are also the only gate. Open the gate with faith, hold it open with persistence, and the law must pass through. This is where most men fail, not at the beginning, when the energy of a new desire is fresh, and the faith comes easily on the wings of excitement. They fail at the middle, at the point in the process where enough time has passed for the initial excitement to have worn down to determination, and determination to have worn down to habit, and habit to have been tested by the apparent absence of visible results. This is the testing zone. This is where the law determines whether the desire was real or merely impulsive. This is where the man who truly intends to have what he desires is separated from the man who merely wished he could have it without having to persist. Rockefeller failed in his first significant business attempt. He was 23 years old, and the failure was complete enough to have discouraged a lesser man into a different and lesser direction. He did not change direction. He studied the failure, extracted from it the specific lessons it contained, corrected his approach, and moved forward with a definiteness that the failure had, if anything, sharpened rather than diminished. That decision in the aftermath of failure is one of the most important decisions any achieving man ever makes, because it is the decision that the law is watching when it determines how much power to channel through the instrument of persistence. Lincoln failed repeatedly throughout his political career. He lost elections. He suffered humiliating public defeats. He was attacked in the press with a savagery that would paralyze most public figures today. And in the aftermath of each defeat, he demonstrated a relationship with persistence that was so consistent, so principled, so clearly rooted in a definiteness of purpose that no external setback could permanently dislodge, that when the presidency finally became available, he was, by that persistence, the man most qualified to fill it. The persistence was not stubborn repetition. It was purposeful advancement through whatever form the next step happened to take, including the step labeled failure by those who could not see the law operating through it. Your persistence is not a personality trait. It is a decision. It is the daily renewal of the decision that the desire you have chosen is worth whatever time and whatever sequence of appearances it requires. The man who persists has made a compact with the law. He has said, in effect, I will continue to meet the conditions the law requires for as long as the law requires them, and I trust the law's timing absolutely. In return, the law guarantees the result, not as a probability, as an inevitability. The only variable is time, and time is the law's domain, not yours. I want to speak now of what it looks like to live in alignment with the law of transmutation on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Not in the exceptional moments of inspiration, not in the dramatic moments of crisis, but on an ordinary day when nothing seems to be moving and the external world looks exactly as it looked the day before. This is where the law is most tested and most proven. The man who applies his principles only when he is inspired is not applying principles at all. He is following moods, and moods are the weather of the mind, changing with circumstance, unreliable as a foundation for anything that requires sustained construction. The man who applies the law on an ordinary Tuesday morning does 5 specific things. He reads his definite chief aim aloud with full emotional engagement before the day begins. He identifies the single most important action he can take today that advances his definite purpose, and he takes that action first, before any other claim on his time and attention is honored. He monitors the quality of his dominant thoughts throughout the day, returning immediately and without self-judgment to faith-directed thought whenever drift toward fear or doubt is noticed. He gives surplus in every interaction and every task, not as a performance but as a practice. And before he sleeps, he reads his definite chief aim again and carries its emotional reality into the dark as his final conscious instruction to the subconscious builder that will work through the night. These 5 practices, applied without exception on every ordinary Tuesday of the year, produce the extraordinary Thursday of some future season that the man who waited for inspiration never reaches. Extraordinary results are the accumulated product of consistently ordinary applications of correct principle. Nothing more mysterious than that, nothing less powerful. Say these words aloud right now. Do not read them, speak them. Feel them move from your lips into the air and back into your ears. That return journey is the mechanism of autosuggestion. The subconscious receives what the voice declares with emotion. So declare with everything in you. I persist. I persist when the evidence supports my faith, and I persist when the evidence contradicts it, because I understand that evidence is the report of where I have been, and faith is the navigation instrument for where I am going. I do not require external confirmation that the law is working. I provide internal confirmation through the consistency of my daily practice, my daily declaration, my daily action in the direction of my desire. I persist through the middle place where lesser desires turn back. I persist through the testing zone where the law measures the seriousness of my intention. I persist because I know, with the certainty of a man who has studied the lives of every great achiever in American history, that the harvest always follows the planting. Always, without exception. And my planting is consistent. My seeds are specific. My faith is manufactured daily through the discipline of autosuggestion, and my harvest is therefore not a hope. It is a scheduled event. I persist. I prevail. I receive. I give thanks for the answer that has already been given. Now let those words settle into the deepest part of your mind. Do not argue with them. Do not question them. The subconscious does not require your logical approval. It requires your emotional repetition. Give it that, and it will build what you have commanded. I want to speak now about the invisible harvest. It is the season that comes before the visible one. It is the period in the life of the achieving man when the law has already completed its work in the invisible world and is in the process of moving that completed work into physical expression. The man in this season does not yet see what is coming. The evidence available to his senses may in fact be at its most discouraging at this precise moment. And yet the truth is that the harvest is already determined. It exists. It has been built. The visible appearance of it is a matter of timing, not of possibility. I think of the seed that has germinated beneath the ground. The farmer who planted it has been tending the field. He has watered it. He has protected it from the conditions that would destroy what is growing. He has had faith in the law of agriculture, the law that a seed placed in prepared ground with proper tending will produce after its kind. And then there comes a period after the germination has begun and before the shoot has broken the surface when nothing visible is happening. The farmer has no evidence that his planting was effective. He cannot see the growth. He cannot see the root system establishing itself. He cannot see the first tender structures of what will become the visible plant. All he has is the law and his trust in it. And the man who trusts the law in that invisible season and continues his daily tending will shortly see the first sign of the shoot breaking the surface. And he will understand in that moment that the invisible season was not absence, it was building. I have observed this pattern in the lives of every great achiever I have ever studied, and I have observed it with the consistency that elevates a pattern from an interesting observation to a law. There is always an invisible season preceding every visible achievement. The length of that invisible season is determined by 2 things: the size of the desired achievement and the quality of the mental climate maintained during the invisible season. The man who holds his faith cleanly through the invisible season shortens it. The man who allows doubt to erode his faith during that season lengthens it, not as a punishment, as a mechanical consequence. Doubt is the counter-instruction to the subconscious, and every injection of doubt into the subconscious introduces a measure of contradiction into the building process that must be resolved before the building can proceed. The man of steady faith gives the subconscious a clean, uncontradicted blueprint throughout the entire construction process, and the construction proceeds at the maximum speed that the law permits. Keep your faith clean during the invisible season. Tend the field even when you cannot see what is growing in it. The harvest is coming. The harvest is always coming for the man who does not abandon his field. I want to address now the man who is listening to these words and is thinking, with a certain weary honesty, that he has heard teachings of this kind before, that he has been inspired before, that he has made declarations and set goals and read books and attended seminars and felt the fire of possibility, and then watched that fire die down as the weeks passed, and the visible results did not arrive on the schedule he had imagined. If you are that man, and I say with the certainty of a man who has spoken to millions of ordinary people that most of you have been that man at some point, then I want you to hear something that the teachings you have encountered before may not have said clearly enough. The teaching is not the transformation. The application is the transformation. A man who reads this teaching and is moved by it and speaks the affirmations and feels the emotion and then rises the following morning and returns to the same undirected day he has always lived has changed nothing. He has had an experience. Experiences do not transmute unless they are translated into application. The application is this: write your definite chief aim today, not tomorrow, and with enough precision that it could be handed to a contractor as a specification sheet. Read it aloud with full emotional engagement every morning before any other claim on your attention is honored, and every night before sleep. Do these two things without exception for 90 days, and the change in your mental climate will be so visible to you that continuing the practice will require no discipline at all, because it will have become, through the operation of cosmic habit force, the automatic expression of who you have become. 90 days, not 90 years. The law does not require a lifetime of preliminary practice before it begins to show results. It requires the consistency of correct practice maintained long enough for the subconscious imprint to deepen from instruction to habit. For most men, this is approximately 90 days of unbroken daily application. At the end of that period, something will have changed in the inner world with such thoroughness that the outer world cannot maintain its current shape. Things will begin to move. Doors will open that were not there before. Connections will appear. Ideas will arrive. The opportunity that the law of compensation has been organizing in response to your surplus will present itself. The people your mastermind purpose requires will enter your life. This is not prediction. It is the description of how the law operates when correctly applied, derived from 20 years of observation of every variety of human life and circumstance. You have been equipped tonight with the complete architecture of the philosophy that produced more millionaires in America in the 20th century than any other single body of teaching. You have been shown not the opinions of a man, but the laws of achievement extracted from the lives of the greatest achievers in recorded American history. These laws are not respecters of your current position. They are not impressed by your past failures or your current lack of resources, or the voices around you that have been telling you who you are and what you can expect. The law operates for the man who operates it, and you now know how to operate it. There is one more truth I want to give you before the night takes over completely, and the subconscious receives its final instruction of the day. It is the truth about what prayer actually is, understood through the lens of everything this teaching has delivered. Prayer, in its deepest and most effective form, is not the act of petitioning a distant authority for an outcome. Prayer is the act of aligning the mind, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the universal intelligence that connects every mind to every other mind around the certain truth of the desired outcome. It is the mental act of entering, fully and emotionally, into the state of having already received what has been asked for. It is faith made operational. And when a man prays in this way, not with the pleading of the uncertain, but with the gratitude of the already answered, not with the begging of the insufficient, but with the acknowledgement of the already provided, he has placed himself in perfect resonance with the law that governs the transmutation of invisible desire into visible reality. This is what it means to act as if God has already answered your prayer. God, in this teaching, is the infinite intelligence that underlies all law and all creation, that responds to the precise and emotionally held direction of the prepared human mind with the same unfailing reliability that the natural world responds to the laws of physics. The prayer that is answered is always the prayer that is already believed. The desire that is received is always the desire that is already claimed. Act from the receiving, not toward it, from it, and the law must deliver. Take one final deep breath. Feel the weight of the night around you, the silence that has gathered itself for this specific moment, the absolute readiness of your subconscious mind to receive the final instruction of this day, and carry into the deep rest that is coming this single thought, this single truth, spoken now 3 times with the conviction of a man who has received the teaching and accepted the law. My desire is already answered. I act from its completion. I rest in its certainty. My desire is already answered. I act from its completion. I rest in its certainty. My desire is already answered. I act from its completion. I rest in its certainty. Now release it. Let the conscious mind go. Let the effort dissolve. Let the law continue its work through the night in the silence and the dark and the deep, where all great things are built before they are seen. As your breathing slows and the boundary between waking and sleep grows thin, understand that you are entering the most productive workspace of your entire day. The subconscious does not close for the night, it opens. The conscious noise that has been overlaying its deeper work throughout the waking hours finally quiets, and the subconscious builder has full access to the blueprint you have handed it. Every thought you impressed upon it today through your morning declaration, through your noon return to purposeful attention, through your evening affirmation, all of it is now material available to the subconscious for the night's construction. The invisible architecture of your desired life is being built right now, in the hours of your sleep, with the same law-driven precision that governs every other form of construction in the universe. Your subconscious mind does not rest. While the body renews itself and the conscious mind takes its necessary pause, the deeper mind continues to process, to organize, to create the conditions and the connections and the plans and the inspirations that will arrive in your waking hours as ideas, as opportunities recognized that would otherwise have been missed, as the sudden clarity about a step that had seemed unclear. These gifts of the sleeping hours are the direct product of the definite instruction you carry into sleep. They are the law's response to the clear blueprint you have provided. Receive them without argument when they arrive. Act on them without delay. They are the law speaking in the language of practical guidance. Now you will speak 7 commands aloud, not tomorrow, now, before the night takes you completely. Open your mouth and speak these words with all the conviction you can bring to them from this deep and receptive state. I am the architect of my own destiny, and I build it with thought, faith, and persistent action from this day forward. I have a single burning desire that is specific, written, declared daily, and already being built by my subconscious into its physical equivalent. I manufacture faith through the daily repetition of my definite chief aim with full emotional engagement, morning and night, without exception. I have destroyed the 6 ghosts of fear by naming them, understanding them, and applying the laws that dissolve them. I give more than I am paid for in every service I provide, knowing that the law of compensation is incapable of ignoring my surplus. I form and maintain a mastermind alliance of minds aligned with my purpose, knowing that the combined intelligence of harmonious minds produces what no single mind can achieve alone. I carry my definite chief aim into every night of sleep as the final instruction to my subconscious, which works through the darkness, building the invisible toward the visible expression of my chosen desire. These 7 declarations are not wishes, they are commands to the most powerful instrument on this earth, your own mind, operating in alignment with the laws that govern all achievement. You have spoken them. The subconscious has received them. The law is now at work. Go forward, build, persist, receive, and remember, in every moment of doubt and every hour of testing, the truth with which this teaching ends and with which your new life truly begins. The answer was given before you finished asking.